parish of Short Heath. There is nothing very unusual about it. Estates and houses abound, many of them built in the last 25 years. The parish church lies in the centre of the parish and has served the area well. But with the spread of housing in the north and south of the parish, this situation has changed. Those living north of the busy Lichfield Road and southeast of Lanehead Bridge, which is a notorious bottleneck, have not gone to the parish church. Perhaps it's the hassle of travel, perhaps difficulty in identifying with an established community.
Fraser Williams is rector of the Short Heath team. Fraser, what was the solution you hit upon?
This is a parish of some 28,000 people. We have 22 housing estates, each with their own individuality. But we've only got one church building. The parish is divided into 3 equal segments. But with the parish church in the centre, it became very clear that people would not cross main arterial roads to come to a place of worship. So we hit upon the idea of not building churches, but creating centres of worship. We wanted to bring in priests with a little bit of experience who would gather a congregation round them. And we used some of the many public buildings that are available to us.
In the north of the parish, there was nothing. But here in the south, a Sunday school had been established, here at Rosedale St Giles Infant School. This was the starting point for our worship centre.
What problems were encountered initially, Fraser?
When we opened the Furzebank Worship Centre, that happened some 18 months or 2 years after a Sunday school had been formed in our church school. I had always imagined that the site of the worship centre would have to be open to debate. What I hadn't bargained for was the fact that many people, particularly parents, had become wedded to the bricks and mortar of the church school. That was a great pity, because we found ourselves faced with no little opposition in relocating the worship centre at the comprehensive school. But we thought it was right for a number of reasons. First of all, an infant school only has furniture suitable for infants. Secondly, the parking was not adequate. Thirdly, we were not in the centre of the community we wished to serve. And all these reasons, we felt God was asking us to make a bold decision and change. But relocating our centre of worship from an infant school into the community centre took a great deal of courage, and we had to overcome quite a lot of opposition.
In November 1984, Deaconess Beryl Morgan launched Allensrough Worship Centre. Furzebank Worship Centre opened a little later, in March 1985, under the leadership of the Reverend Ian Murray.
Morning, everyone.
From the start, worship here has had a relaxed and informal atmosphere, quite different to what most people expect. All the hymns and prayers are on overhead projector. Books are not used at all.
Ian, was this a deliberate decision?
Well, yes, it was a deliberate decision, and it's had some advantage which we've discovered as we've gone along. Firstly, it means that newcomers, when they come into the worship centre, they don't actually have to find places in the service. All the service is there in front of them. It also means that mums who come with their children and their babies, they don't have to worry, because they can hold their children and see the service quite easily without struggling with a book. Also, people have learnt to sing with their heads up instead of with their heads buried somewhere in a hymn book. And lastly, of course, lots of people don't have books nowadays at home, and so it means that they haven't been presented with a library when they come into the worship centre, which is a good thing, makes them feel at home.
Children are encouraged to play a full part in the life and worship of the centre and are treated as contributing members of the congregation. Both adults and children are now involved in ministry in other churches using music, singing, dance and drama. Teaching is done in age groups as part of the worship. During this time, a creche is provided for the very young. Some groups use the classrooms which surround the main worship area. The theme is common to all groups, but it is explored in different ways with each group. These are the young 3 to 5-year-olds. And this is the 8+ group, sitting down to their studies. These are the 6, 7 and 8-year-olds. And now, back to the infants, fully engrossed in their studies. Even the adults are expected to take part in the teaching by responding to questions and asking others. The sermon is not a monologue, because all have something to share, as well as something to learn, and discuss matters freely with one another.
Or liability within the family.
Yes, I think. The life and influence of the worship centre extends beyond Sunday mornings into the week. Thursday house groups provide an opportunity for basic Christian teaching, kindness to others, or Bible study, prayer and worship, and the development of relationships. Work hard and do not be late. Currently, there are about 18 people involved in 2 groups. The centre is now experimenting with a monthly family evening to include children. 8 to 11-year-olds have their own club, which meets for an hour on a Wednesday. It can be lonely on a big estate, so every fortnight, on a Tuesday morning, there is coffee and discussion, sometimes involving an outside speaker. Banners are used as a visual stimulus and provide a focus. They help transform a school into a place for worship. Members of the centre have been encouraged to offer their creative gifts to help design and make the banners.
John, how did you become a Christian?
I think it's fair to say that with the opening of the Worship Centre some 2 years ago, I was encouraged by my wife and family to attend once a month to their family day. And from there I had a realisation that there was a void in my life and that our Lord could fill that void.
So, how did Worship Centre help your Christian faith?
Well, previously, I think my Christian faith was something very private that I couldn't really speak about unless I felt really relaxed. When I came to the centre, it was very relaxed and informal, easy to make friends, and I found that people were willing to share with me their Christian experiences and what God had done in their lives, if they'd had any prayers answered. And that strengthened my faith because now I've got their experiences to draw on as well as my own. And as well as reading about God's work in the Bible, it's lovely to hear about it and see it going on firsthand at the centre. And it's just made my faith seem a lot more real to me and a lot more alive.
Helen, what do you like about coming to the Worship Centre?
I like the atmosphere, the relaxed atmosphere, and the children and the happiness here. You get a lot of laughter, which means a lot to me. I like the band. I really think that's an asset to the Worship Centre. I enjoy the projector, which is of great help too. I think the coffee is a great thing because it gets you to know people's needs. Matter of fact, it's got everything for me here that I want in with my religious life.
How was the style of worship planned?
Well, we were very lucky because we had a social survey available of the area, and it told us some very interesting things, one of which was that the majority of people living in this area are actually under the age of 50. So what we tried to do was to design the worship for younger people and make it so that it wasn't going to be culturally unfamiliar to them. Try and design a style of worship which actually made them feel at home, and I think to some extent we've been successful, judging by the response that we've had from people.
And how did you advertise the Worship Centre?
Well, we tried everything. We delivered leaflets through every door. We wrote off to the local papers, and of course they were quite interested. Their imagination was captured by the fact that there was a vicar who played an electric guitar. That was something that was a bit unusual, and of course they latched onto it. So we had pickies of me with my electric guitar in the newspaper. We also wrote off to the local radio stations and let them know what was happening. And of course the publicity meant that to some extent I got branded as the Rockering Rev, which was a bit of a hoot, and I suppose I quite enjoyed that really. But it did have its disadvantages as well as its advantages. One of the things that happened was that some of our Christian friends from other parts of Walsall got a bit upset because they thought that here was a rather non-traditional vicar trying to foist his ideas on a poor congregation who didn't actually want it, which actually wasn't true. When we started, we had no congregation. 1, 2, 3, 4!
Satan, hearing me, he thinks I'll be damned.
Dance is another creative activity which helps to express worship or convey a message in a way that words cannot. Ideas come from the group themselves, perhaps inspired by a particular song.
The eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf shall hear, the chains of the lame shall be broken, streams will flow in rivers of healing. Your kingdom come, your will be done, now that we have become your sons, let the prayer of our hearts daily be, God make us your family, God make us your family.
Good relations have been developed with the local Methodists through joint activities and services. The worship centre is aimed to be Christian rather than denominational.
Coming in.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Well, all right.
What, you just all right?
It wasn't.
The staff of the school and community centre have been very supportive of the new venture. The community staff have allowed the swimming pool to be used for a baptism and are pleased to loan equipment. The worship centre sponsored a youth week at the school in 1985. All who are interested are invited to share in the decisions that have to be made and the planning for the future. The worship centre sets itself goals each year. For the second year, they have included a 10% increase in congregation, establishing a Christian union at the school and getting another house group off the ground.
Even better.
Ian, the congregation's grown steadily. How have you achieved this?
Well, I don't think I've achieved it at all. I think that the folk who come to the worship centre feel that here is something valuable, something worthwhile, something which perhaps is a modern expression of Christian faith and worship, and they actually feel that they can say to their friends, relatives, enemies even, come and see, come and be with us.
Are you planning for a building of your own?
No, not at the moment. I think that possibly a building of our own could be seen as a retreat away from the community centre where we're actually involved in the rough and tumble of community life, and to actually go and have a building of our own would actually take us out of all that. Although I must admit that sometimes when I'm loading up the car on a Sunday morning, I could actually believe that it might be a good idea, but no, not really, not at all.
Ian, what's your vision for the future?
Well, first of all, I'd like to see greater activity within the community. One of the things that we're hoping to get going is a coffee bar and community room down in 2 blocks of council flats, and that's very exciting. The other thing, I think, is greater evangelism in the area. We tend to be a little bit sort of in our own box, and I'd like to see us getting out and about more on that front. Also, I think we've begun to discover that we have a responsibility to share what we've discovered here with other Christians in the diocese, a sort of a ministry to the wider church.
You shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace.